Hi, my name is Andy Binker-Cosen from 21 Stocks, International Analysis of World Economy, and we're here today with Mr. Mason Duchatschek, Management Consultant and expert on employee selection, development, and productivity. He's the author of the book Sales Utopia, and he's worked with Miller Brewing Company, with Purina Mills, Bunzl Distribution, with the Brick Warehouse, just to name a few. He's been mentioned in the New York Times and Selling Power and Entrepreneur magazine. So tell us, Mason, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a real honor. Tell us, what's your opinion on the trends in human resources lately? Are businesses developing internal departments, or are they outsourcing mostly?
Very good question. And some of the trends that I'm seeing, number one, because of low unemployment, smart employers are recognizing that this is an opportunity for them to upgrade the quality of their talent in various positions. If you're a pro sports team, imagine that you managed a pro sports team. You would always seek to get more talented players to fill your roster spots. Well, companies are starting to do the same thing because unemployment is so high that they have the ability to be much more selective than they were in the past, and some companies are taking advantage of that. As it relates to outsourcing, I don't really see the biggest, how do I phrase this? I think that the trend toward outsourcing is going to be eclipsed by a trend more towards web video. I think that the average employee is more threatened, really, by web video and technology than they are having their jobs shipped overseas. For example, here in the United States, if a company decides they want to have a customer service call center set up to solve customer problems, and they recognize that the customers are typically angry when they call anyway, it might only make the situation worse if they decide to outsource those things to someone in another country who doesn't speak the language very well or doesn't understand. That would just make the customers who are already angrier. Now, that's not a problem, and I understand why companies do that to save money, but the bigger issue is what's going to happen to those jobs when it isn't someone in another country doing it. It's someone in your home country that speaks your native tongue communicating perfectly every single time via web video 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. When a customer has a question, they can get the answer they want online immediately, and it's perfect every single time. There's no worry about, the employer doesn't have to worry about whether their products or services are being misrepresented because quality control is perfect. I mean, they know exactly what they're putting on those videos to examine. I mean, look at Apple Computer. I mean, they have hundreds of videos on their site and say, hey, video tutorials, what do you want to know how to do? You know, in the old days, that would involve employees, and then there might have been the trend to outsource some of those technical people. Now it's web video.
Do you think that
those are the trends I see.
Do you think that the internet could replace human resources? Looking at
replace, no. I think that's why when I answered your question, I really see two trends. I see companies becoming more demanding and expecting, because they can, the best people for the positions. Like I said, upgrading their roster spots for jobs that do require thinking and knowledge and interaction and problem solving. For those positions, I think companies are going to, human resource executives are going to be very engaged in top talent, but they're going to be less burdened by refilling unskilled positions or routine, monotonous type work that can be put on video. Does that help?
Yes. And
they're still going to be busy. They're just going to be busy doing different things.
In regards to that, things are, as you said, there are many different things, and many times things are changing very quickly. I mean, many of the careers and jobs that exist today, 10 years ago, didn't exist, nor did anyone think that they could exist. How can human resource departments search for candidates to fill jobs that don't exist yet?
Very good question. struggle in any position, I will tell you that the differences typically come down to three things. Number one is skill. In other words, can someone do the job? If it's a sales position, that means can they close? Can they handle objections? Can they prospect? Can they manage their time? If it's a customer service job, can they handle difficult customers? Do they know their product inside and out, etc.? So skill is the first one. That's can they do the job. Second issue is attitude and values. That's really a measure of will someone do the job and why. For example, someone may have all the skills in the world, but if they if they're not reliable, they don't have a work ethic, they abuse substances, they're not honest, then who cares? The third issue is behavior, and that's a measure of how someone does the job. For example, you may have a salesperson who's very skilled and knowledgeable about the job, but if they won't ask for an order because they're not assertive enough to ask for an order, then they'll fail. So the question comes back to how do you prepare? Well, I think what's happening is companies are looking at a job and saying, okay, these are the skills, attitudes, values, and behaviors that are required by this job, and recognizing that they can teach people the skills to do the specific job, but if the attitudes and values and behaviors aren't in alignment with what the job's going to require, it's going to be a very poor investment of the company's resources to train people for positions they're not suited for. They either won't stick, they won't stay in those positions, they'll leave, or worse, they'll be miserable and stay and make everyone else as miserable as they are, and neither of those things are a good option. So I guess the short answer to your question is I see companies taking a look and saying, what does the position currently require in terms of skill, attitude, values, and behaviors, and saying, okay, if they match the attitude, values, and behaviors, then it may be worth the company's time and energy to invest those resources in developing a person. If not, it won't.
Many countries are evaluating the possibility, if they haven't already, of raising the retirement age, especially with many countries piling up so much debt and having to pay for the change in demographics of an aging population, especially when we get all these baby boomers retiring. How do you think that job applicants, job pools, candidates, and employee selection will change if retirement age is raised and suddenly the labor market includes much older people?
Very good question. I think that's a very good question. How do I think it will change? That'll be interesting to see. If people have to work to be able to provide for their families, they'll do what they need to do. I think that I think companies will begin to take a look at maybe people who are maybe older. They may not be as desirable for physical jobs that require strength and agility and mobility, but those people that are older, tend to have better judgment and more life experience and may be very useful. Just because someone's older doesn't mean they don't understand things and can't think and reason and use judgment. Now they may not be doing physically demanding jobs if they're older, but who's to tell a 75 or 80-year-old man who understands a particular industry that you can't work? If that particular individual can provide value to an employer that exceeds what he's charging in salary, then more power to him.
Now, you just spoke of rejecting certain people for job applications, and an article this week by Sam Hananel from the Associated Press spoke exactly of that many companies with more applicants because of jobless rates increasing are having to face more jobless applicants, and many times they reject jobless applicants, preferring to take somebody that's coming from another job rather than somebody coming from 6 months of searching for a job. As an expert on employee selection, how true do you think this is?
That's a broad brushstroke and a big generalization. I would hope that most companies would look and say, I want the best person for the position, and if they are taking factors such as age, race, or sex into consideration as opposed to there are companies that do, and if they're prejudiced, or then they're not getting the best person for the job, and they don't get the best person for the job, then that's punishment in itself. As it relates to getting people who, or looking at people who have been out of work for a while, I think that just the amount of time they spend out of work isn't as much of a factor if they can make a case that they actually invested that time wisely to acquire new skills or ability. And let me give you if I'm an employer and I have two applicants, one that has been out of work for 6 months and one that has been at the same job for 10 years. I may ask the person who's been in the job, the person who's got 10 years of experience says to me, hey, I've got 10 years of experience. The reality of it is they may have 1 year of experience 10 times, and that may not be that much more valuable. And they may have been comfortable enough in the ways of their existing employer that they never really sought new skills or abilities or kept their talents up to date. Whereas someone who's been out 6 months, if they invested it wisely, I'm not saying that all of them do, but if they invested that 6 months wisely, they can acquire all kinds of particularly relevant skills, knowledge, and insights that some of the people who were, quote, comfortable in their last position, may not have taken the initiative to do. I can't remember what article it was, but I read recently that says, technology is changing things so fast that by the time someone gets a 4-year degree, a lot of what they learned, even past 18 months or 2 years ago, a lot of that's almost obsolete. So, again, the answer to your question is yes, I do think some of the people, there are people out there who discriminate against people because they haven't been employed for a while. Yes, I do think that happens. I bet you'd be naive to argue that it doesn't. Should it? No, but I think smart employers take each individual on a case-by-case basis. Not all employers are smart, but